Thousands of California office parks are sitting underused right now, while the state's housing shortage keeps squeezing renters harder than ever. That is why developers and cities are racing to turn dead commercial space into the next wave of affordable homes. California's office market is sending a very loud signal. Vacancy remains high in major markets across the state, and some of the most heavily affected properties are the suburban office campuses that were once built for long commutes and full weekday occupancy. Now, those same places are becoming the front line of a new housing strategy. Instead of letting these sites sit empty, California is starting to treat them like ready-made land for residential reuse. And that shift matters because California's housing problem is not easing up. The state still faces a massive affordability gap, with too many households paying far too much for too little space. That pressure is especially intense in the Bay Area, Los Angeles, Orange County, the Inland Empire, and parts of San Diego, where land is expensive, construction costs are high, and zoning has historically made it difficult to build enough housing fast enough. So when an office park sits empty in one of those markets, it is no longer just a commercial vacancy problem. It is a housing opportunity sitting in plain sight. That is the big story here. The old suburban office park was designed for a completely different era. It was built around long commutes, oversized parking lots, and the assumption that office workers would show up in person 5 days a week. California's work patterns changed, and the building stock did not keep up. Hybrid schedules, remote work, and shifting business demand have left much office space underused, especially in suburban corridors that no longer feel like the center of anything. But California is no longer treating these places as dead ends. It is treating them as housing inventory. That is where the new suburban micro-neighborhood comes in. The smartest conversions are not just about putting apartments inside old office walls. They are about redesigning the whole site so it feels like a real neighborhood. That means ground floor retail, shared community space, small cafes, co-working areas, fitness rooms, and outdoor gathering space all built into the same footprint. In California, that approach makes even more sense because people want shorter trips, more walkability, and more flexibility in how they live. A converted office campus can become a place where daily life actually works. A resident can step out for coffee, work from a shared lounge, meet a friend in a courtyard, and go home without crossing town for every errand. That is the 15-minute suburb idea in action. And in California, that idea is becoming a practical housing strategy, not just a design trend. The real advantage of office conversion is that the bones are already there. The roads already exist. The utilities are already in place. The land is already developed. That gives California's cities and developers a huge head start compared with building on raw land from scratch. Instead of spending years creating infrastructure before housing even starts, they can use what is already built and focus on reshaping it for residential life. That is especially valuable in California, where land is limited and expensive in the places people most want to live. But the most powerful part of this trend is not just speed, it is affordability. California needs housing that regular people can actually afford, not just expensive new units aimed at the top of the market. That is why office-to-residential conversion has become so important. It can create homes in established neighborhoods where infrastructure already exists, reducing some development friction and opening the door to more attainable pricing. And California is already proving that the model can work. In Los Angeles, new conversion rules have made it easier to convert older commercial properties into housing, including office buildings and even parking structures. That is a big deal because it means the city is no longer treating every building as untouchable. It is actively creating a pathway for reuse. That kind of policy shift changes the game for developers who were previously stuck waiting on approvals, exceptions, or zoning changes that made projects too difficult to start. Los Angeles is also important because it shows how a conversion strategy can support both market-rate housing and affordable housing in the same city. That is the real upside. When a city creates a more flexible reuse framework, it can use one old office building to serve multiple housing goals at once. That is why this story is bigger than just a redevelopment trend. It is a supply strategy, and California desperately needs supply. In markets across the state, rents have stayed high enough that even modest savings matter. If a conversion project can use existing structure, existing infrastructure, and faster permitting to bring units online sooner, that can make a meaningful difference. It does not solve the housing crisis by itself, but it can add supply where the state needs it most. The most interesting California conversions are the ones that go beyond a simple apartment makeover. They reimagine the whole property. A former office lobby becomes a shared resident lounge or retail frontage. A conference room becomes co-working space. An oversized parking lot becomes a landscaped courtyard, an EV charging hub, or a mix of open space and structured parking. A dead corporate campus becomes a place with more than one purpose, and that matters because residential communities are stronger when they have more than one daily function. That is also why modular interior construction is starting to matter more. In a conversion, modular systems can help developers reconfigure space faster and with less waste. Instead of demolishing everything and starting over, they can preserve the structural shell and rebuild the inside around residential uses. That can help with both schedule and cost. And when the project is meant to produce more affordable units, every bit of efficiency matters. California is the kind of state where that efficiency can make or break the project. Because here, the hurdles are real. Some office buildings are simply not good candidates for conversion. Floor plates can be too deep. Core layouts can be too rigid. Structural systems can make residential design difficult. That is why not every office park is going to become housing. But the ones that do work can play an outsized role, especially in suburban areas where large parcels and existing infrastructure make a full campus transformation possible. That is the key. Not every building works, but the right building in the right California location can become a major housing win. And California has already started showing what that looks like. In Oakland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and other major metros, adaptive reuse is moving from idea to action as cities look for ways to handle empty office inventory and rising housing pressure at the same time. Some projects are mixed use. Some are entirely residential. Some include affordability requirements, but the common thread is the same. Old office space is being revalued as housing potential. That is a huge shift in how California thinks about land use. It also changes the conversation around affordability. A lot of people hear office conversion and think luxury apartments, but California's version of this story is more interesting than that. The state is starting to use conversion policy as an affordability tool. That means tax incentives, zoning flexibility, and approval streamlining can all be used to support projects that include affordable units, workforce housing, or mixed-income housing. That matters because affordability is not just about building more homes. It is about building the right homes in the right places. California has a long history of jobs being concentrated in places where housing is expensive or limited. Conversions help close that gap by turning underused commercial land into places where people can actually live closer to where they work, shop, and move around. That cuts down on commute pressure, supports local businesses, and makes better use of existing infrastructure. And it can help the state get more housing without pushing development farther and farther out. That is important because California cannot build its way out of the housing crisis with only new subdivisions at the edge of metro areas. It also needs infill, adaptive reuse, and site-specific strategies that work in built-up markets. Empty office parks give California a chance to do exactly that. Some of the best California examples are showing that converted office space can deliver meaningful housing numbers. In Los Angeles, major adaptive reuse efforts are pushing new apartments into older commercial buildings. In other parts of the state, office-to-housing conversion is showing up as a way to use existing property more efficiently while also adding units in neighborhoods that already have roads, transit access, and public services nearby. That combination is what makes conversions especially valuable from an affordability perspective. Because when the basic infrastructure is already there, developers are not paying to build an entire neighborhood from the ground up. That can improve the financial picture enough to make lower-cost housing more realistic. It also makes public policy easier to target. Cities can focus incentives on projects that include affordable units, require a share of below-market housing, or support mixed-income outcomes. In California, that kind of alignment matters because the state has been trying to increase housing production while also making sure it does not all land at the high end of the market. This is where office conversion becomes a powerful middle path. It is faster than greenfield development in many cases. It uses less land, it reuses existing assets, and if done right, it can support both market rate and affordable housing in places that already need more of both. There is also a broader neighborhood effect. When an office park turns into housing, the surrounding area changes too. A space that used to go dark after business hours now has residents coming and going all day. That supports nearby retail, helps create safer streets through more consistent activity, and gives underused commercial corridors a second life. In California, that kind of shift can be especially important in suburban markets that were built around office employment, but now need a new identity. Instead of empty parking lots and silent hallways, the site can become a real community with apartments, small businesses, shared amenities, and open space. That is how dead commercial real estate starts functioning like a neighborhood. And the affordability angle gets even stronger when cities use policy to guide the outcome. Some California cities are already making it easier to streamline conversions, reduce parking burdens, and rezone older commercial sites for housing. That kind of reform matters because it lowers the friction that often kills these projects before they begin. If the state wants more affordable housing, it cannot make every conversion fight through the old rules designed for a totally different market. The market has already changed. The rules are catching up. And that is why California office parks are becoming one of the most important housing stories in the state right now. They are not just empty buildings, they are underused assets with the potential to become homes, neighborhoods, and real affordability wins if the state keeps pushing in the right direction. The opportunity is clear. California already has the buildings, the land, and the infrastructure. What it needs now is the speed, flexibility, and policy support to turn those dead office parks into housing Californians can actually afford. If California keeps leaning into that strategy, the next generation of housing may not start on raw land at all. It may start in the place everyone used to drive past without noticing. If you want more California housing market breakdowns like this, subscribe to Housing IQ and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one.